Welcome to this first annual James Wheeler Davidson Luncheon. It's a thrill to be commemorating this amazing individual who did so much for Rotary and all of us. Today, we get to learn more about James Wheeler Davidson, and we get to enjoy each other's company and enjoying each other's smile. That was so awesome to see all your smiles this morning. I would now like to introduce Bruce Fenwick, who is the chair of our James Wheeler Davidson Committee and also past president of this club, to now introduce the committee and get the program rolling for this afternoon. Bruce, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Manon. Yes, I was going to introduce the committee a little later, but what the heck, I'll do that right this instant. Those would be George Brookman. I want you to stand up while I'm saying this. George Brookman, Janine Murphy is not here. Eric, where's Eric? Yeah, okay, Eric Bennett. And we also Craig, where's Craig? Craig Henderson and Trevor Ironside. Thank you very much. You guys are folks that really made this happen. Thank you. Now I want to welcome everybody here, and thank you all. But I'd like to zero in on one particular group for a reason, and I would ask actually anybody from any of the other Rotary clubs who are Rotarians to please stand for a second. I know we've got people here from Calgary Stampede Park, Okotoks, Calgary West, Calgary East, Centennial, Chinook, Cochrane, Red Deer. Now, I asked you guys to stand up. What happened here? Please stand, just for a second. I want to thank you for coming. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now you can sit down. Now, the reason I did that was because I want everybody to understand that the James Wheeler Davidson legacy is as much or more a legacy of all of us in the city and district as it is our club alone, because we were the only ones here at the time, admittedly. But the fact is, when you understand that James Wheeler Davidson also personally was involved in chartering clubs in Banff, Camrose, Drumheller, Stettler, and Dauphin, Manitoba. He was also the district governor. He was also an RI vice president. And most importantly, throughout the 1920s, he was, in fact, involved in the committee that was involved in the extension of Rotary around the world. He was on that for many, many years and directly involved in that. So he was very much more than just a Rotarian from the city of Calgary, or from the Rotary Club of Calgary. So I want you to know that. And where he was coming from was his vision. He visualized Rotary could be a force for world peace through friendship. And remember, this was right after World War I. It was a big war. and he was looking for, he realized that Rotary and the beliefs that Rotary had could have an impact on world peace. And so he focused on that. And so I think all Calgary District Rotarians can consider the JWD legacy as their own and use it to help enhance your own member pride, collaborations, recruitment, and impact around the world, here and abroad. So that's where he was coming from. He exercised that belief in spending his time to expand Rotary around the world, and also in his personal approaches, because he interviewed, and Bob will get into all this, I'm sure. He interviewed a lot of people one-on-one. He made very good friends all around the world. That was his style. Now, we've got a 3-minute video I'd like to show. You're ready to show that, Joanne? That would be great.
Hi, my name is Eric Bennett, and I'm the president of the Rotary Club of Calgary, downtown. With me today is Doug McMillan, the president of the Rotary Club of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Halifax is almost 5,000 kilometers away from Calgary at the far eastern end of Canada. We're thrilled to have Doug here today in Calgary as a visitor.
From our 2 clubs here in Canada, 2 Rotarians, James Wheeler Davidson from Calgary and Lieutenant Colonel James Ralston from Halifax, sailed to Australia and New Zealand over 100 years ago with the goal of establishing Rotary clubs throughout that region. Their trip was supported by 37 Canadian Rotary clubs and the Rotary International Board.
Not only did they establish clubs in Melbourne, Sydney, Wellington, and Auckland, but Davidson went on later to establish another 23 clubs from Greece to Egypt and all through the Far East, including India, Thailand, Singapore, and Indonesia. Our club has been meeting here in the Palliser Hotel for over 100 years now. This painting, hung in 2005 to commemorate Rotary's 100th anniversary, reflects the image of James Wheeler Davidson as he traveled throughout the world promoting the spirit of Rotary.
In 2025, Canada will again welcome the world when the Rotary International Convention is held right here in Calgary. It's a wonderful feeling to stand in this lobby and realize that from this very room, the world of Rotary was enhanced and widened by these 2 men, and that Davidson actually walked out of here as he started on his epic Rotary journey.
It is a thrill for us to congratulate Melbourne, Sydney, Wellington, and Auckland on their 100th anniversaries. You did a great job spreading Rotary throughout Australasia. Your 100th anniversary project, Giving Every Child a Future, with impact in 9 other countries in your region, will save many lives. We invite all of you to join us in 2025 as we celebrate Rotary worldwide. And
many Canadian Rotarians hope to join you in Melbourne in 2023. I hope to be one.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Doug. Happy 100! Yahoo!
Yeah, you can see that was fun making that during COVID here. We had to work with the hotel for a month to even gain access at all. And then fortunately, they got very generous with us and said, well, you can't take a mask off in the lobby, so you wanted to do it, but you could go into this room, which is private, and take that last scene without a mask. And so I said, bingo, that's what we're doing. And Steve over here was the guy who did all the videography and put it together, so thanks very much, Steve. Now, I want to just make a couple more comments. The Rotary Club of Madras, India, this is their flag right up here. And by the way, Manan, I've got a banner from Madras Club, which is signed by the president and member members. So, awesome. Anyway, the Madras Club proudly recognizes James Wheeler Davidson as their founder. You go to one of their meetings, you go online, you'll see their anthem. The first thing they show is James Wheeler Davidson, their founder. They, together with the Rotary Club of Bombay, created the JWD Clubs Network just in the last 2 years. And they created JWD pins in the last 6 months. I've got one in my lapel here, which I just got last week. Anyway, in addition to that, we've got the Rotary Club of Melbourne is creating quarterly JWD newsletters, which haven't seen the first one yet, but that's what they're doing. All the flags here, I think 13, I was going to say 13, looks like I think 12 of the 15 clubs that JWD chartered clubs in are represented, the countries. He did over 30 clubs altogether, but multi in some places. And Madras and Athens sent their banners along with their flags. By the way, Manon, here's one from Greece, or from Athens.
Awesome.
For Greece. And so also the Red Deer Club, which is the home club of Dr. Lampard, brought a Canadian flag because he did 5 clubs here. And they signed it. It's over there in the end if you want to take a look at some of the signatures and so on. And today's menu, by the way, is related. Greece was the only European country where James Wheeler Davidson chartered a club. And that's why we've got Greek salad. And you'll find the dessert is Australia and New Zealand related. Anyway, now it's time to get on with things. I will call up Tom to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you. Dr. Tom Keenan.
Well, Dr. Bob Lampard, he's one of the most remarkable and inspiring people I've ever met, inside or outside of Rotary. This is a guy who really puts his whole heart into everything that he does, whether it's writing award-winning, extremely long history books about medicine in Alberta, scrambling up challenging peaks, falling down once in a while, or really channeling the indomitable Rotarian spirit of James Wheeler Davidson. So it was in that context that I got to know him. Bob was sure that a mountain in the Ghost region, west of Calgary, was approved to be called Mount Davidson by the Geographical Names Board of Canada. And this was in the 1930s. In fact, that request came from the Alberta Motor Association and the Rotary Club of Calgary. So it was something that we asked for in 1934. Like typical government bureaucrats, they didn't get around to changing the map. And Bob didn't like that. So in the early 2000s, the map still showed what is now Mount Davidson as Forestry Summit number 135. Of course, typical Bob Lampard, he did something about it. Today, if you go, and I did it this morning, and you Google Mount Davidson, the first hit is the highest peak in San Francisco, as it turns out. But then you're going to find this 2,919 meter tall peak in Alberta. It even has its own Wikipedia entry now. So with the support of his amazing son, Jeffrey, who's sitting right over there, Bob pulled together this ragtag group of Rotarians, and through a combination of foot power, ATVs, for some a helicopter, and he cajoled and dragged a bunch of Rotarians up to the top of that mountain. And to give you a little perspective, that's kind of about the same height as Mount Rundle. So those of you that know Rundle and Banff, it's like that, only it's gnarlier and more miserable, right, all the way up. And we made it on August 2nd, 2003. There's actually a website, spectacularmountains.com, that describes what we did up there. They built a cairn. They placed a capsule with Rotary Club paraphernalia and a summit register. They held a formal meeting and even drank champagne up there. And there are plenty of other stories from that trip which cannot be told from the Rotary podium. One thing you don't know is Bob's extreme thoughtfulness. Several years ago, I received an award. He not only came to the ceremony, he took a bunch of pictures and sent me a beautiful collage. So that's just the kind of guy he is. He's an honorary member of our club. He was named a top 100 Alberta Physician of the Century after serving as Director of Medical Health at the Mitchell Center for more than 27 years. He's the recipient of numerous awards. He's done extensive research on James Wheeler Davidson. He will talk anyone's ear off on that subject, so you're in for a good treat today. He lives in Red Deer with his wife Sharon. One of Bob's many books is called Medicine Makes a Wonderful Life, and that's certainly true of him. But I think it's his 745-page history of medicine Alberta that actually sums him up best. He's grinning because the title is Young, Lusty, and Full of Life. Please join me in welcoming the world's top expert on James Wheeler Davidson, Rotarian Dr. Robert Lampard.
What a thrill to be here. Tom, Bruce, for all the work you've done in preparing for today, and all the rest of you, I have a job for you. But I think it's appropriate, particularly today on day 6 of the Ukrainian invasion, to note how Jim Davidson was a man of peace and goodwill. And we need more Jim Davidsons, particularly today. It's also an opportunity to return a 99-year-old favor. Your club chartered our club. The charter credit went to Jeff Lydia, a member of your club, and he brought his boss, Jim Davidson, to come and give the presentation on brotherhood. It was a thoughtful, my introduction to your club came in 2002 when I was at Rotary headquarters. And I was given a tour of the top floor, walked past the flags as you have them here, the president's office, and I walked around a corner and I looked at the wall and there was a painting. And I thought, that's a painting of the foothills of Alberta. What's it doing here? So I looked carefully, and the inscription said, presented to Rotary International by the Rotary Club of Calgary on their 75th anniversary in 1980. And it struck me, what a thoughtful gift. It defines your club. It's not the cost that's important, it's the idea, just like your legacy committee idea. I don't know that you all realize this, but you have a very unique and treasured history in Rotary. And I'll add some comments to that. But each of you have a responsibility to become Davidson apostles, and I hope today is just a start. The Rotary world is looking to each one of you as knowledgeable authorities, and that you will play your part in extending Rotary worldwide to the budding network of JWD clubs, and particularly to the Rotarians who come here in 2025, and come here specifically to this hotel to have their picture taken with the Davidson painting, just as I did for the first time a few minutes ago. But it will be an acknowledgement of the record 32 clubs that he chartered in 15 different countries. So who was Davidson? Well, he came from Austin, Minnesota. He was born in 1872, and by age 19, he was touring dignitaries around the United States, like Sir Henry Stanley and Admiral Perry, and many others. But it also gave him an introduction to the second Perry expedition to find the North Pole in 1893, and he was selected as one of 8. But it almost cost him his life. In a storm 5,000 feet up on Greenland Glacier, his huskies ripped his tent open and all the snow poured in. He woke up his 2 colleagues and saved their lives by moving them into the Perry tent. Unfortunately, the next morning he woke up because his sleeping bag or blankets had become waterlogged and frozen. His leg was marble hard. So he and the physician, with Perry's approval, evacuated him on a dog sled. I'm astounded that he survived a 3-day evacuation. But he did, and then looked towards his next career in life and decided he would become a syndicated columnist. But he looked for a place in the world that didn't have any, and he finally found one in then known as Formosa, now as Taiwan. And he almost lost his life then because the Japanese decided to invade it. And he managed to turn Taipei, Formosa, over to the Japanese one night, almost losing his life in the process. But there was no bloodshed, and he's still honored for that feature fact in Taiwan. And in the process, he earned the Order of the Rising Sun, 5th class. And he was only the second person in the world to receive it. So he joined the Japanese army as a lieutenant, learned Japanese fluently, and as he went, he observed what he was seeing and the people he was interviewing, and wrote the most authoritative book on Taiwan written to that date. He also found that the Aboriginal headhunters, who were more than feared, came probably from the Mayan Peninsula and not from China, which raised a very interesting historical question when the Chinese say that Taiwan is theirs. He proudly, for the rest of his life, wore their tattoo. He was asked to join the U.S. Consular Service, and by age 32, he was the acting chief consul of the largest embassy in the United States, or outside the United States, which was in Shanghai. He took a sabbatical, and he rode the new Trans-Siberian Railway. He reported on it as a confidential document to the American Army, for which he was thanked. And then he dropped into London to receive an FRGS, or fellowship, in the Royal Geographical Society for mapping Formosa. However, his salary was a little low. He didn't like that, given some of his other interests. So about a year later, after he'd returned to Shanghai, he developed typhoid fever and was evacuated out of China on a stretcher. And it was on that trip coming home that he met Lillian, who looked after her, but he earned her hand by rescuing her family after sneaking into San Francisco the day after the San Francisco earthquake. Their marriage, however, almost floundered after one cold winter in Winnipeg. So they moved to Calgary in 1907. And he and his brother bought land from the CPR, 750,000 acres, and sold it. He also started a lumber company to service them. I don't know whether it still exists. It did 10 years ago. It's called Crown Lumber. He franchised it into 52 franchises across the southern prairies, and that's where he earned his money. He and his brother developed the Sunnyside and Hillhurst communities here in Calgary, so as you drive through them, think of Davidson. Never idle. In his community, he contributed to the Mawson Report, the Stampede, the Lougheed Building. His love of music led to the formation of the Calgary Symphony, and he was one of those involved in establishing Camp Chief Hector. He was also a through roads man, and that meant promoting highways. He initially started out by going down farm roads that had telephone poles. He always carried 3 paints in his trunk, and he would get out and paint the poles, indicating or helping the people who came along behind him to know when to turn. More importantly, he then formed the Sunshine Trail, Association to build a road from Calgary to Yellowstone and Salt Lake City with a side road to Glacier. That interchange would become the foundation for the Waterton Glacier Rotary International Park that you all know of. The trail, of course, now is the American connection from the U.S. to Highway 2 and the Alaska Highway. And in 1925, as was mentioned, he made the motion to form the AMA, having already driven the second car in Shanghai and the first one into Lake Louise. So excited he was about the possibilities of Calgary that he formed the Calgary-Banff Tourism Association and to bring American tourists to Calgary and Banff. That picture, I think, is taken a year after that highway opened. But Davidson's life changed when he joined Rotary in 1914. He became your president in 1919 and district governor in 1923. In his governor's year, he chartered a record 5 clubs, a record that stood for many decades in Canada. But his prominence came in Rotary in 1920, when he wrote an article for the Rotarian on how Rotary could become an international power by promoting peace and fostering mutual understanding through fellowship, friendship, and goodwill. It was an inflection point, and I believe it was in Rotary, and certainly in Davidson's life, because it was written 4 months after the American Congress had decided not to join the League of Nations. And so many prominent Americans joined Rotary in search of peace. That's a topic that needs further research. The article was so impressionable that the incoming president of Rotary, Dr. Crawford McCullough of Thunder Bay, saw an opening and immediately offered to extend Rotary to Australia and New Zealand after the Americans had failed 4 times. A dubious RI president, Pete Snedecor, came to Calgary and he spent 2 hours with Davidson. He said in his note afterwards, "The Calgary Club is one of the best clubs I have ever visited." He was convinced. Davidson wrote colorfully of that trip down under, along with his partner Leighton Ralston, Canada's future World War II Minister of Defense. And they sharpened their interview weapons, as he put it, on unsuspected Aussies on the ship on the way down. When they got and realized they were going to have the first club formed, it was the Melbourne Club in Australia, and he wrote how he had a spasm of joy. My wife asked me not to elaborate on that. But it was only after dispelling that Rotary was everything from a drinking club to a secret agency of the Prohibition Party. Ralston was a teetotaler and Davidson drank very little. Back home, he was appointed to many Rotary committees and became the 3rd vice president of Rotary in 1926. But with his health in question, Paul Harris asked him to fill in the Asian gap with Rotary clubs. The key principle in the 33-point strategy that he wrote out was that any charter must be held in trust, with international members being replaced by local members in time. For instance, the Madras Club had no Indians in it. He made them promise that there would be. In preparation, Davidson sold his company to his employees, and he embarked on the 8-month trip that eventually turned out to be 30. And he was, of course, accompanied by his wife and his 14-year-old daughter. Their low point was the first stopping point, and that was Turkey. And he was unable to get a club started in Istanbul because President Kemal would not approve of it. So he went to Greece, rather saddened, and he managed to do the impossible. He brought the head of the Royalist movement and the Republican movements both together as charter members in the First Club of Athens. He then went on to Cairo and Jerusalem, and when he hit Bombay, he thought he had a choice. He wanted to create a high-class club, as he called it, and he did, with 4 knighted Brits as part of the original chartering group. The problem, though, that he faced was the editor of the Singapore Times. And he wrote repeatedly at how they didn't want an American business club. So although the editor refused, the owner of the paper joined the club. And within a year, they had 128 members with 20 different ethnic backgrounds. That's how popular and how quickly popular Rotary became in Asia. It was becoming an exciting story, and so Paul Harris wrote him and said, would you write articles for the Rotarian? Davidson, with his 2,000 interviews, each an hour long, said, I don't have the time, but maybe my wife will. He was having a challenging time adapting American RI regulations to Asian communities, and eventually had to change many of the chartering regulations, the original regulations that Rotary had, and he did it successfully. When he returned, Rotary was all set for him. Every director since 1928 wrote a letter of appreciation to him, starting with Paul Harris. Every director in Rotary and all the executive took the train to Vancouver to meet him. Your club members went to Field, BC to meet him in the CPR superintendent's private car. And they picked him up, brought him back, and your club presented him with the one thing the family still have that they won't give to the university, and that's the silver tray that's engraved from your club. But the trip was costly. Not only did it cost $250,000, of which Rotary paid $32,000, it was costly because the family had acquired a number of health problems, dengue fever repeatedly, malaria. This almost, for the third time, killed them. And the only thing that saved them was that they missed the telephone pole on the left, and they overturned in a ditch. So they didn't end up with head injuries, but it was some months before they were able to proceed. However, Jim was in failing health. The Davidsons moved to Vancouver, and Davidson passed away of congestive heart failure in 1933. In October of that year, Lillian and Marjorie visited the Harrises in Chicago, and they planted a blue spruce in their garden, in the Harris' Garden of Friendship. And Marjorie added the tag to it, James W. Davidson, World Citizen. But it was a great testament to the friendship and respect that the Harrises held for the Davidsons. In the Christmas card that year, Paul Harris wrote, "He has come and gone, and his memory will be revered by legions. His work more admired as the passage of time lends broader perspective, for no man could have given more." In his last 1947 article in the Rotarian, Harris reminded readers that through the work of Davidson and Ralston and others, Rotary had come up the hard way, like the United Nations that had just been formed, by promoting goodwill. Now, a word about Lillian. She was a Berkeley English major. Their daughter was born in 1916. The 1928 trip began just after Rotary had firmly and finally decided not to include women. Despite this, she gave the 1932 speech in his stead, a very human summary of their worldwide trip. And she ended it with a lovely Kipling quote that's very descriptive. "There is neither east or west, nor border, breed, or birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth." In her 29 articles in the Rotarian, she had made an agreement with her husband to have them printed. And it came out as a book in 1935 called Making New Friends. That was the title of their strategy. And in the introduction, Paul Harris wrote, "Jim Davidson's unfailing diplomacy His enthusiasm for Rotary and his remarkable capacity for work carried him over many seemingly insurmountable barriers. Now, following my chat with Marjorie and grandchildren Don and Leslie Abramson in 2000, where I learned that the prominent 2,900-meter peak 12 miles north of Lake Minnewanka was named after Davidson, I managed with a lot of help from Calgarians to find that the map didn't have the Davidson name. When we finally found a date, we found their error, which I received an apology and a thank you from the Geographic Names Board. But it also meant they put the name on the map, and so I didn't have to argue about whether they were going to make up for their mistake. Anyway, we corrected that and held a first ascent of the mountain with the new name, and 24 Rotarians and friends made it for the Rotary meeting on top and the care and dedication. You can see Mount Davidson from Red Deer. That's a picture taken from Red Deer, and all the way to High River. It's that prominent. The ascent week was a karma moment for Tom, who joined the expedition 4 days before as your representative. He and Jeffrey solved several near disastrous problems that arose given my nearly fatal accident on Mount Ball the week before. Marmy Hess was our chef de mission and congratulated us the morning after with a bottle of champagne and a 25-page taped treasure of her memories of Jim Davidson. Then in February 2005, your club unveiled the centennial painting outside this room. Its central theme is the CPR logo spans the world. Davidson and Jeff Lydiot are looking over the globe. Mount Davidson is on top, and at Tom's suggestion, JWD's foundational work is linked to the polio campaign. The painting also raised $4,500 from the CPR, another adroit decision on your club's part. My thanks for that, though, because the painting met my commitment to Marjorie and the Abramsons to have a permanent Davidson display somewhere in Calgary, and that's what helped me secure the Davidson's rotary material for the University of Calgary, which is why it's here and not in Evanston. I'll leave Bruce with several suggestions for carry-on activities, but I would like to highlight one that I discovered in doing my homework. There's a 1933 article in the Calgary Herald on JWD that Paul Harris had framed along with a picture of JWD and hung it in his study. If it can be found, that could be presented to Jennifer Jones when she comes to visit you this summer. After visiting Calgary in 1933, Paul Harris wrote to the district governor of the time, Fred McNally of Edmonton, on how his visit had made a very deep impression upon him. And he added, "I think I can truthfully say, if it were necessary for me to give up my own country, I would want to go to Canada. Among other things, I envy you in having had Jim as one of your neighbors." To a packed audience in 1934, with only a light shining on a portrait of Jim Davidson, past President Albert ended his tribute to him as I will. The soft wings of peace now cover him, but the thing that is divine in us is not confined by our death. For wherever there has been glowing generosity, radiant sympathy, a giving of self through work, those qualities shine on and on when we are gone, as the stars shine in the Canadian night. The legacy of this remarkable couple is in your hands. Thank you. Just before
Before I call up Martin, who will be thanking you, are there any quick questions that we have a couple of minutes we could answer, or you had another comment or two you wanted to make, or did you do that? Any questions? George?
I have a question. What were some of those rules that he had to change to adapt for the Asian Rotary clubs?
They needed a larger number of chartering members because of the monsoons, because of the hot weather, particularly in the coast of India. Everybody left for the highlands, so they had nobody to attend a meeting. So we had to create the opportunity for sabbatical or summer breaks. The big one he had to change was to allow individuals, like in my case, physicians with different ethnic backgrounds, to join Rotary. So you could have an Indian one, a Malayan one, Indonesian one, English one, so on. The Rotary opened that up to it. It was interesting because when he went to present his final report to Davidson, the first thing they said to him before he gave his 75-page report was, "We've agreed to all your suggestions."
Thanks. Bob will be around, so if you want to ask him questions one-on-one afterwards, I think that would be fine, right, Bob? You're around for that?
Yeah, I will add, when you're finished, I will add a couple of things that didn't get asked.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let you do that, and then I'll get Martin to come up. Yep, thanks.
It's my firm belief that the most internationally significant Albertan of the first half of the 20th century is James Wheeler Davidson. As those of you who have read a bit about Rotary history realize, when Dave Forward wrote his book, Century of Service, one whole chapter is is about him, with apologies for the 7 errors that are in it, because he wrote the book a year before mine came out. The second thing is that 2022 is the 150th anniversary of his birth. So if you're attuned to numbers, there's an important one for you. The third is that although he's phrased as Marco Polo of Rotary, I've always believed he was far more than a Marco Polo who was a recorder and a documenter. He was a builder. And you can see what he's built with the foundation that Rotary has as the only continuing service club that remains worldwide. That's his legacy. So I think it's time to, I think my comment is that it's time to recognize him as the finest example of the third object of Rotary, will it build goodwill and better friendships. And I can think of no finer example of that than him. And I'll close with quoting your former past president, a chap by the name of Fred Osborne, who came up to our 10th anniversary and left us with this marvelous quote. Anniversary time is a stock-taking time, a time to recall your achievements, not in a spirit of self-glorification, but as a yardstick by which your growth in the future may be measured. Thank you.
And I'll call our District Governor, Martin Parnell, to thank our speaker. Thanks.
Great, thank you. It's just an absolute honor to be here today. In 1965, I was a 10-year-old lad living in Devon in the UK with my mum and dad and 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And every Thursday, I would sit expectantly by the front door waiting for the arrival of the Eagle comic. This was one of those old-fashioned, I think they call them, what are they called, those books now, you know, with all the pictures. Yeah, comics, I still call them comics. And I would grab the comic and I would open it up to my favorite character, and that was Dan Dare. And Dan Dare was an astronaut, and Dan Dare every week would head off to the stars and have amazing adventures, and he would meet incredible aliens, and he would try and make the place a good place. He would try and bring peace to the cosmos. And every time I read his article, his comic, I would just feel a spirit in me that just raised within me. I don't remember any of the stories, but what I felt was possibilities. And so when I was asked by Bruce to say a few words in thanks to Robert, I asked, well, I need to know more about James Wheeler Davidson. So Bruce sent me an article from the Alberta History from 2004 that was written by Bob. And I received the magazine and I sat in my comfy chair and I started to read the magazine about James Wheeler Davidson. And I had the same feeling reading that article as I had when I was a 10-year-old boy reading about Dan Dare heading off into the cosmos. And I think for me, and listening again to what Robert's saying today, and all of us here today, it's a feeling of possibilities, a feeling of hope, and a feeling of the Rotary spirit of what we can do. It was mentioned that this is 150th anniversary. James Wheeler Davidson was born on June the 14th. So his anniversary will be coming up very soon. But his spirit lives with us. And I think it's incumbent on us to take that spirit and to do something with it. We're people of action. Again, I want to thank Robert for being the conduit and doing it in such a brilliant way of bringing that spirit into the room today. And we talk about the international conference coming up, and absolutely that is critical. But we can take that spirit every single day and we can do something with it. And I think that's the power of Rotary, the power of the thousands and thousands of clubs we have around the world, and the many people who believe in Rotary and what we believe in. And so I sincerely hope that we use James Wheeler Davidson in a way that will spread the word, and in a way that each of us will do something that will make a difference. And we are people of action, so I think that's the combination of James Wheeler Davidson and us. We can forge just amazing things as we've done in the past, so we can in the future. So I want to thank you today, Robert, for coming and for speaking. It's an absolute pleasure. And again, please, a huge round of applause for this man. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're about ready to wind up the James Wheeler Davidson aspect. I just want to finish with one comment here, and that is there are many dimensions and themes to highlight James Wheeler Davidson over the next decade and beyond. And I really hope that all of you in all the clubs recognize that he's yours to work with, to help you take pride and make collaborations and so on in your club. And if you're going to the convention, you just say, look, I'm from Calgary, Canada, or I'm from District 5360, home base of the Marco Polo of Rotary, James Wheeler Davidson. And I think you will find that you can open discussions, make collaborations, friendships, and especially from countries that are on the back on your menu. You'll find they're all listed in there, and clubs. Anyway, think of this as a JWD decade, and join us in this journey. President Manon, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Past President Bruce. You know, when was it, Eric, that we got the email from the Rotary Club of Madras saying, hey, we want to do something, we're organizing all the clubs that were formed by James Wheeler Davidson. We'd like to invite you to this Zoom call. Here's one of the benefits of COVID. And Eric and I attended these Zoom calls with Rotarians from around the world, from the clubs that JWD formed. That was really cool. So we come back, it's now my presidential year, and it's like, what are we going to do with this? And I thought of Bruce, and I said, Bruce, could you be our representative on this James WD Alliance around the world? And Bruce took this, and today this idea of this luncheon was started by this man who made this all possible. Thank you so much, Bruce. And of course, in Rotary, you don't do things by yourself. So he had an amazing team. And thanks, George, for picking up the phone and inviting all these beautiful people here today. That's great. I do want to mention one more thing, is that, Bob, we have made a donation to COST in your name. COST is the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology, provides education all about hygiene and sanitation and clean water around the world, and we're a proud partner with COST. And with this, I am going to ring the bell that JWD rang so many years ago. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.